All right, welcome back, House of DELVENTO. If you're confused, we got some new theme music. We put new music. We got new logo, new topics. We're evolving. We're moving on a little bit. Very exciting. I was going to call this season 2 of House of DELVENTO because we're going to be covering a topic that I've been kind of casually supportive of and interested in. You've heard me bring it up on several streams before, and even old followers years past I've talked about this, but I never realized how fleshed out the whole ideology is, and especially recently I came across some buzz about this issue. There's some work going on in the Congress right now. So I felt it'd be a great time to start something new on the House of DELVENTO and cover it, especially as a white American. I think it's a unique topic to take on. There's a responsibility. There's, I guess, a bit of a guilt. We'll definitely talk about that because my guest today has a lot to say about a lot of these things because the left and the right of America is I guess, very confused on all of this. And the issue itself is reparations. Mm-hmm. I mentioned there's some buzz right now because there's a bill in the House right now called H.R. 40 that's been proposed really since the 80s. But, you know, there's some chitter-chatter going on. So we're very happy to start something on the House of DELVENTO, a little bit of a different look here and everything, some new music. But old followers definitely listen here, especially I know most of our followers are from India. We got 50% from India, 50% outside. This is a great topic for everybody to listen to and learn about, even when you talk to your parents about indentured servitude and stuff like that in your context or whatever, or what's going on in the Caribbean or North America. But definitely would love you to listen and support. This is a topic for everybody. Reparations is a global concept. It's something that's been done in several other countries before. It's been done in our country. But to be frank, this is kind of an American issue for American people, and I'm glad to be doing that, actually covering some issues in my own country. So we're going to call this series the Freedmen's Bureau. Freedmen's Bureau, if you don't know what that means, look it up. Doesn't seem like there's a lot of chitter-chatter going on about this online. Actually, a lot of YouTube channels just kind of say we're not going to talk about it. It's kind of weird. So we're going to start our own Freedmen's Bureau on House of DELVENTO. We're actually going to dedicate time 100% to reparations, nothing else. We're going to talk about it because I think it's a great solution. It's a great idea. I've been reading some books about it. If you're just listening to the intro of the podcast and you're skipping around, make sure you check this book, From Here to Equality. Samantha and her team and a lot of the new reparations advocates that have popped up the past year really recommend this book, and it's fascinating. It's really made me think, and make sure if you're just listening to the intro, you check this out, but watch the podcast. This is going to be our first about reparations. We're going to have several, and check out Samantha's channel and all the stuff in the description and all that. Welcome to the podcast, Samantha. Angelique, you go by Sam. However, I'm just so glad to have you on here. You're awesome.
I'm excited. Thank you for having me. And I'm just excited that you're interested in the topic.
Yeah, so, I mean, you're very outspoken on your channel about white people. Okay, let's be honest. So how have conversations been in general with white people about this subject in your context? You got 10 white people. What's general, what are the apprehensions? It's always been a touchy subject.
It's all over the place, right? So I meet white people who understand and who are on board. I meet white people who are a little skeptical, and then you start actually fleshing it out, and they're like, oh, I understand. And then I meet white people who are like, no, slavery was good for you, or people like you got housing and food. So there are levels. There are levels. And then you get the people who are like, oh, you shouldn't get reparations. Like, they gave you guys welfare. And it's like, yes, but the majority of people on welfare are white. So, and it's a universal program. It helped everybody who needed it. So that doesn't count. So yeah, it's interesting, but I feel like right now it's just one of those topics that nobody really knows about, right? Like when you say reparations, people think, oh, you're paying reparations for slavery. They don't think about after slavery, how there was just a period of time that when slavery was over, they released the slaves to nothing. So you got to think like, yay, slavery's over. What do you do? Where do you go? So a lot of people are sleeping on the sides of roads. People are dying of smallpox. They're getting illness. People are dying of exposure. So that happened right after slavery. So then we pull ourselves up by our bootstraps and start building towns. And then white mobs start raiding these towns, burning them down and killing people. So it's like, then there's that. Then after that, they start that's around the same time they start the black codes and the segregation. So we can't even build the same kind of wealth, right? Because there's a black side and a white side, right? So whites have access to banks, they have access to getting help in some type of capital. Black people, we don't have any of that. So it's like two Americas literally until we smash back together in the 60s. And then you say, well, it's all the same now. We're all the same, but it's still not, because there's still that gap.
It's so recent, and I think that is what shocks a lot of people, especially to a lot of my non-American listeners. You might not realize how like recent this is. Like I remember my fucking aunt going to anti-busing protests like up here in New England. Like I live in the Northeast, the enlightened North. You know, I live in the enlightened North, and anti-busing. Like my mom used to tell me stories. She used to like date black guys.
Oh, your mom was brave.
But yeah, well, Gramps would come out with a shotgun. So
yeah, like, I believe it. That's what I said. Moms was brave.
Well, that's the thing. And Sam, I'm glad I can be honest about that with you, because I know the vibe of your channel. I know you're like really real, and you remind me like a lot of the. I'm not trying to say like I have a black friend stuff, but like you remind me a lot of the folks I grew up in, because I grew up in more of a poor neighborhood. I didn't grow up in the black neighborhood, because there's a lot of gentrification in the Northeast. So I grew up in like the Italian Puerto Rican neighborhood, but we were all kind of poor. And there's a certain real talk that happens, when you're on the lower side of the socioeconomic thing. And I've been able to, pull myself up a little bit, as the society is set up for someone like me. But I noticed that as I've gotten up a little bit, people tend to be a little more sensitive about these topics. They don't like to just be honest. They don't like to just kind of be real. Like even something as simple as like white boy can't jump, like a simple joke like that, or like things that you'll say on the block or things like that. So one thing I do like about your channel is that you do kind of like just talk like what I see as a regular American talks like. And people look at America outside, they think we're like this sanctified intellectual people. We're not. We're like high school graduates. We're working people. We're trying to get by. It's very expensive to live here. It's like we joke around, we swear, we're very racist people, we're very sexist people, we're very bigoted. And like some people, a lot of people, it's like, it's hard to even, so the only point I'm ranting is like, I'm just like, I wouldn't even be comfortable telling that story about my grandpa to someone in the certain city environment right now, or like an urban, or like a white liberal or something like that. They'd be like, oh, well, they're like, I wouldn't even be comfortable telling a story like that. I feel like
but it's
everybody's walking on eggshells,
See, but that's the thing. Like, people need to understand.
It's hard to talk about.
But that's like a whole real story, right? Like, that's a real story. Like, people need to understand, like, these are things that were going on during that period of time. Like, my mother was born into segregation. Like, my mother and my father were born into segregation. Like, that is a real statement. So, I think people shouldn't be so, I don't know. I think people shouldn't be so worried. Like one of my newest best friends, Edie, is a white lady. I met her. I think we met in like November, and we become like the best of friends. And she'll tell me, she's like, sometimes I'm just terrified of like saying the wrong thing and offending somebody, and like the whole conversation being shut down.
Yeah, basically.
So I guess all of us, when we have these conversations, I guess we have to just start having conversations like, listen, you need to say what you need to say. And if you say it wrong, we're not going to beat you up for it. We're going to tell you like, ooh, yeah. Let's try to rephrase that so it's not such a, whew. But we don't want to make people feel like they can't have conversations, because we can't grow if we can't talk to each other.
Well, yeah, because I think part of step one with reparations is educating people about the history, right? It's like you have to tell people before you do the economic arguments and this stuff, like how the book lays it out, you have to educate people about these atrocities.
Yeah.
And yeah, it doesn't start in slavery. It gets up to the 80s, 90s, and you start thinking about your parents and your grandparents and like, whoa, or like even your brother or yourself, or like stuff that you said in a job or something like that. It's like, yeah, that's this concept of white guilt, as they say. I've said it a couple times, and you talk about it on your podcast, that like, that's this, I don't know, maybe I can't define it too. It's this defense mechanism that generally, it's like a psychoanalytical theory, I guess, that white people, when we talk about something like this, the defense mechanism is to just say that, this doesn't exist and we don't want to talk about it. And it's, do you want to define that a little bit? Because you talk about it a lot.
Or not even that. Or sometimes people will be like, or like you'll have people like Kyle who'll be like, we shouldn't have to feel guilty about what our parents did. So this is the thing, like, I don't want white people to feel guilty. I just want you to do better. Like, I don't need you to feel guilty. Just do better. Like, we know what happened in the past. we can even chalk it up to this is what it was in the past, but you still have to make up for it and do better in the future. And that's really what the problem is. It's just like, if you're with somebody, they'll be like, okay, I know I cheated in the past, and it's going to get better. But, you know, from time to time, I cheat a little bit, but it's not like before where I was like bringing them to the house. Like, I go to their house. Like, this is what we're going, this is what's going on. It's like, no, just accept this is what happened in the past. Because there is a wealth gap, right? There is a wealth gap. Like, Black families in Los Angeles, median wealth is like $1,400, right? White families is like $340,000.
That's crazy.
That is an actual gap. Now, if you go nationwide, it's a little bit smaller, but it's still basically, if you go median family income, like, Black families have $800,000 or have like around $800,000 less than white families, $700,000, somewhere around there. That's a big gap. Like, we have to fix this. We have to close this. Oh, thank you. My deliveries.
Oh, I bet you got something. Yeah, what do you got?
I like my deliveries. More stuff from Amazon. I know, and they're evil, but they deliver. Like what they deliver.
They provide a lot of jobs up here. I gotta say, you know,
I worked for Amazon for years, and
see,
and you know,
I'm not
and
really
when
a
I worked,
lefty, you know.
Yeah, you know, I worked there. You know, this is the thing. I worked there for a while as a delivery driver, and even though they were stealing part of my tips, I was still making pretty good money. So it's just one of those things where I was like, I was making like $35 an hour doing grocery deliveries. So it's like, yeah, I could go get a job, but I'd make less money.
Yeah, they pay and they give you, yeah, but they work you to the brim.
I didn't have no benefits, though. I didn't have no benefits. No, driving the trucks is terrible. I did that. I quit that. I wasn't doing that.
Yeah, they work you to the brim, right? Like 10-hour shift, 11-hour, 12-hour. Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, he doesn't want to unionize.
Man, I was thinking about that when I was working there.
Your last podcast that you released on your show, by the way, we're already getting into it. Your show is called Actify Press.
No, it's awesome. Reset Race.
Oh, sorry. Reset Race podcast. Great show. It started with like Twitter friends, right? That's kind of like how my show started. Like,
yeah, Twitter, that's how I started Twitter.
Yeah, Twitter, and then you find a niche, you roll into it. That's cool. But yeah, your last podcast talked about that. You talked about like labor's unions and stuff like that, and you're like how this doesn't really matter to most of the Black community, and like that's what I kind of like. That it really is an interesting point that you guys are making. Like, yeah, you know, if you know the white left might have this certain movement, but there's a whole like Black politics that a lot of people might not even know about. And I was pretty enlightened to it from, you know, your show and a lot. And like, it's diverse. A lot of people might think, especially the way politics is pushed these days, that Black is a monolith and they're supposed to fight for $15 minimum wage, Medicare for all this stuff. But maybe some Black people want other things, and that narrative's not being heard because I think the left's very powerful and, you know, the right is ostracized. And this reparations issue kind of, it doesn't, people don't know where to take it, you know. So the left is like in charge right now. So I like that. And on your podcast, you hit the left a lot, and you were hitting them on the labor issue a lot.
Well, so this is the thing about labor unions. Actually, Black people have much better lives in unions. So I am 100% pro union. But the problem is, and what has historically been the problem is, first of all, we had a long time that we couldn't get into the unions. Then now that we finally can be in the unions are weak now. They're not even fighting for white people. Like, they're not even fighting for people as a whole. So when unions were actually powerful and were getting money, you would block us out. Or you would bring us together for the strikes. We would all work together. You would get better conditions, and then you would push us out. Like, the Irish literally went through and pushed us out of like the longshoreman industry. Because they basically band together and told the owners, if you hire any Black people, we will all go on strike and not work for you. Like, so there was so many things that happened. So now here we are. It's like, it's in a moment. It's like, yes, we need unions, but the unions are weak. Like, they're thinking like, what's a really good, strong union? Like, back in the day, like, unions would shut stuff down. Like, I don't see them having the same kind of power. I'd like to see it being built up again. But when you say Black people, like, oh, you should join a union, I'm all for that, but at the end of the day, when we still end up having the shitty jobs and the shittiest of conditions, like.
And this is where reparations comes in, right? It's supposed to be the one way to hopefully redress a lot of this stuff issues. without such a slow thing. Like, okay, you do a labor union, what happens now? You do a $15, what happens? So reparations would ideally be a huge infusion
Exactly.
wealth into this community to kind of make up for hundreds of years of kind of bullshit policies. And like you kind of casually said it before that most welfare recipients end up being white. And like, yeah, I mean, the Great Society was marketed for poor white people. I mean, until they had those Appalachian white people on the magazine cover, like shaking President Johnson's hand, nobody wanted to support that shit. So like, you're right about that. Like a lot of these programs that people say, oh, well, we already gave you housing, we already gave you that. Most of those for like white people, like my mom would be on WIC and stuff like that, and you get all this kind of stuff, and everybody, you know, gets their unemployment and their disability. Like everybody in America is on some type of something right now. So it's like these programs end up being universal. They're great. Support them. Like you say this on your podcast all the time, support them, but also reparations. Yeah.
And I hate $15 an hour minimum wage because nobody's living off $15 an hour.
That's old. That was like 10 years ago, wasn't it?
Like, stop talking to me about $15. I be so angry.
Like $30 now, right?
A minimum. Don't talk to me unless we're talking less than 25. Like, think about, like, as a grown person, don't you dare have the nerve to have another mouth to feed, and you're talking about $15 an hour. Like, $15 an hour is how much money you make when you live at home with your parents. Like, that's a good wage when you live at home with your parents.
It's an old issue.
And you don't have a dog. You just live at home with your parents. You don't pay rent. You don't do nothing.
No, America's so expensive. You need cash. That's the thing. You need cash in this country. That's the only way to survive. If you're without cash, it's hell in this country.
So when they say, oh, yeah, we're going to give you $15 an hour, it'll just raise black people, we'll just raise everybody out of poverty. I live in LA. $15 an hour is nothing. Like, you still going to live in an apartment with 3 or 4 other people. You're going to live in a 2-bedroom apartment with 3 people. The living room's going to be the 3rd bedroom. Like, like this is my frustration with this country, right? And it's not even just a black thing. Like, because people are like, well, universal policies. If their universal policies were actually going to help poor white people, I'd shut up a little bit. But the stuff they propose doesn't even help poor white people. So we're poorer than them.
That's the thing I notice about the left. There's not a lot of poverty, like lower class, like FDR kind of stuff.
It's a lot of race stuff. And
but it's this upper class, like suburban, like,
free college.
Weird.
Let's pay off student loan debt, which is mainly an upper middle class thing. Like most poor people don't have a lot of student loan debt because they could only get so far in school, and they only let you get so many loans when you ain't got nobody to sign for them and when you ain't got no money. So they might have small amounts of student debt, but the people who have like
I had that problem having a
$100,000.
stepdad. People don't realize I had that problem having a stepdad. You're trying to do a student loan thing, like, this country's got a lot of loopholes. You know, like. That's interesting. What's some other stuff the lefties are always proposing?
They love the student loan thing. They love $15 an hour, which doesn't do anything. Medicare for all, I'm all for it, but we have free elementary through high school, and that shit is garbage, and my people are failing. And
we have Medicaid too. A lot of people don't know.
We have Medicaid. They're killing. My people are dying there. Black women die. Our mortality rates for our babies are way higher than anybody else. Like we're dying at a higher level. Yeah. So like there's just the outcome. So it's like
the public school point. The public school point's really big. I mean, that's something that will really shock you in this country, how segregated they are. And it's a lot of people say, in fact, if you look, there's more slaves now, if you talk about prisoners, than there were during slavery. We're more segregated now than we were back then. The wealth gap is bigger now than it was back then. So I remember growing up, the conservatives, the Republicans used to use these points to bash. They used to use these points to say, we're not going to invest in everything. So here's like, how do you argue around it? They would say, well, we've had 40 years of all these programs and black people are still doing X, Y, Z. And you'll have like a Candace Owens type person or someone. Or people say this today. We've already put money into all this education. You know, there's $3,000 per student, and look at the results. So this means we have to privatize. This means we have to cut. And I assume we're probably the same age or so. In the 80s, 90s, that's all we lived under was the cuts. So in like cities where I was growing, like this is when my parents were like losing jobs, and teachers were starting to get fired, and all the like mental people they would like close the hospital, and they would just like show up on the street. It's like so like the 80s were really great for some people, but really fucking awful for a lot of us. So, but the argument was, we're not going to do this stuff that we did in the 70s, 60s anymore. We're not going to invest in schools. We're not going to invest in housing because, honestly, you know what a lot of white people were saying is like they had that scientific racism stuff, like because black people are XYZ, because black communities are hopeless. Let's just bulldoze them down.
Yeah, it's culture. The reason
sorry
black people
for
can't get
ranting,
together
yeah.
is culture. No.
Yeah.
But that's what
I don't
people
get
say.
to talk about this with anyone. Like I said, I feel
You're
like
not ranting. No, that's perfect.
Yeah.
That's perfect example though. People say that all the time. Oh, the reason black people can't get it together, it's culture. It's like, no, it's not culture. It's poverty. Because go to poor white communities, you see the same type of things. You see drugs. You see abuse. You go to poor Asian communities. Go to poor Mexican. It doesn't matter where you go. It's a poverty issue. Because when you start giving people jobs and money and things to lose, they start thinking about things like, I like this house.
Well, that's the only way for groups in this country to have power. Like these little groups, they get economics. You know, I mean, like I'm very close. The Indian American community is very close to this channel. I mean, so this group came in basically the 60s and 70s, and now they're the top earning demographic in the country. Like, how does this? And
they have the highest wealth of the entire country. Yes.
Malcolm X used to talk about like my great grandpa, who's Italian, used to come in, basically a peasant that barely knew how to make a pizza, and now a couple generations later we're all have little houses and stuff like that. So it's like, why and how come my black brothers and sisters couldn't finagle the system in the same way? Because like, yeah, my grandpa's a hard worker and stuff, but like he also like just shot a bunch of Nazis for 4 months. And because of that, he got a free house. So, like, it's like, if you think about it,
we
it's
didn't
like,
get our free house when we came back.
That's the thing. Like, literally a free house. Like, if you're, I got a lot of international guests. Like, follow my video on FDR. You'll see the kind of programs that my grandpa got. Like, and it just became like, instead of living in the cities in Bridgeport, so now we're going to move to the suburbs. So it's not like this idea that, like, yeah, some white people were really racist. Like, fuck, we're going to move out. But some white people just moved out because the opportunities were there. A free house, like this fucking depression's done. So my thing is like, how come we can't give these opportunities to communities that have already been there? Like we know how to do these programs. We have the money.
We just need to go back and reverse it.
What's your theory? Why not? How come?
Everything you did. Well, the reason why they did it was racism. Like that was the whole thing. They set up a whole system. And then like you said, for your grandfather who, wasn't a racist, he just was out,
No.
Well, yeah, but for the peoples whose grandparents weren't racist, right? Let's just say, say you're not racist, right? You don't have a problem with black people. They're relatively cool. You like their music. You find them fun. But two of them move on your block, and now your house is worth less than half of what it was worth. You don't want black people moving in. You don't hate black people. You just like your property value. So they made black people a contagion to wealth. So that's where a lot of racism came up too, because people don't understand after slavery into like maybe 1910, 1920, a lot of places we all kind of just moved together and lived together. They started resegregating us in the 20s, going into the Nader period and into the Black codes, or at the end of the Nader period and going into the Black code. So yeah, people don't even understand, like they resegregated all of us. So they did this on purpose. So the whole point was to break us up and to give certain things and also too, people forget, like the reason why they did the New Deal, like people forget, like white people were running in rich white people's homes and like robbing them and killing them.
It was fucking crazy.
So they had to do something with the white people because y'all was the majority and y'all was tearing everything apart. So they had to, but there wasn't enough of us. So they were like, we can kind of dismiss them. And they knew if we got out of the line, y'all was going to handle us. So here we are. And so I think people miss a lot of like little pieces. They just act like, oh yeah, they just did the New Deal because white people were struggling and starving and they felt sorry for them. No, white people were getting rah-rah and were burning shit down and coming for the rich. And it was about to get really ugly. And they were like, okay, so we don't die. And so we can keep our nice little stuff. We got to throw them some pennies. And that's why they started giving what they gave.
White people are fucking crazy in America, guys.
I say it all
lynchings,
the time. January
bombings,
6th.
like the guy in Tennessee in Christmas blew up half of the southern-eastern communication grids, and we don't hear
about it. And we didn't talk
it.
about it a week later.
The past 10 days, we've had
later.
8 mass shootings. So yeah, white people are fucking nuts. And what does the government do? Like when people do that, they respond. So like, I don't want to start something on this channel, but it's like I always wonder why black people never like took up a little more, more of that approach. At this
Because
point,
they kill
but
us.
it shows you.
Because they kill us. Like the Panthers were just like self-defense. We're gonna sit here with our guns and defend ourselves. They was like, nope, killed everybody. So MLK was like peace, non-violence. He took a bullet too. Like you
I
can't
always
win
wondered
for
that
losing.
because we always hear about how the CIA infiltrated all these groups and stuff and these militant black extremists and all that kind of stuff. But like, can't they do that with the KKK too? Like, why is the KKK still around? I always wondered that. Like, why are these groups like if they could take out the Black Power in like literally like 2 months, or not the Black Power,
Because
the
people don't understand
Panthers.
People don't understand how deep the KKK runs. Like you got senators and congressmen whose daddies and granddaddies was Klan members. Like those robes, everybody like they said long time, those robes were replaced by police uniforms, judges. Like that shit runs deep. Like they don't want to. I have a feeling if you really start going through these white supremacist groups and these KKK groups, a lot of that's gonna run in the halls that people don't want to know that people, that they're a part of that. I really do. Because if they wanted to shut it down, they would. If the KKK was like some brown Middle
Muslim
Eastern
group or something,
group, Middle Eastern group or something like that, they'd be gone right away. Who's like out here like attacking, white women Christians, like they would shut it down. So
isn't that the fucked up thing with the lynchings? Like I remember, I didn't discover Ida Bay Wells until my adult life. Like it's just kind of crazy. Like I didn't learn about the Tulsa race riot until I saw Watchmen. Like so, it's like,
oh my goodness, and that's only one. Like there's so many.
It's weird, Sam, because I used to think like I'm this educated person. I went to this university on scholarship. I learned all this European music and all this become like this artist guy. Yeah. I think I'm this cultured guy, but I didn't learn a lot of like not only world history, my own history, and like you start reading about this stuff and you go on Wikipedia and start clicking and like, wow, it's like now like it makes sense. And recently I've been looking into like American historiography, which is like the study of how history is done. And like I didn't realize that like until Kenneth Stamp wrote a book in 1956, it was called A Peculiar Institution. It like kind of started to expose the slave trade. Like until then, the prevailing narrative in like all the schools and all the universities was like, well, at least, we rescued them from Africa. We gave them food. Their IQ is lower and stuff like this. And they're not. And this whole people just believe this. So like a lot of people ask like, oh, how come in the 30s people didn't do more? Because it literally was in the zeitgeist, the PhDs, the sociologists, the psychologists. Like everybody just said, oh, they're like this because it is, and slavery was, it was, we fought and fixed that. So until like the 50s and 60s, people didn't even fucking think of this. Until like the 1619 Project, like a couple of years ago, people didn't even know that like there were slaves. So like if like a yuppie New Englander like me doesn't know this stuff, I would usually think that most of the hundreds of millions of Americans don't know the history. So that is like step one for reparations, though, isn't it? Like, or you have to know this history, right? And do you ever get frustrated having to constantly repeat it over and over again? Because you've said this on your show as well. As a black person in America, you're like required to learn all this. And as a white person, part of the privilege is that we can live without knowing this stuff.
No, it's true. Because you have to. Because if you don't learn it, you'll go insane. Because you don't understand why the things that are happening to you are happening. And like, even for me, like, I'm lucky I come from a certain amount of privilege. So like, but it's just, it is a lot to learn the history. And I don't so much mind sharing the history with people. It's just frustrating when you have people be like, no, that's not true. And I'm just like, listen, I went to high school here. I went to public high school. I remember getting into an argument with like one of my exes from high school about this. And I was like, listen, we went to the same fucking high school. We took the same classes. I was like, you didn't learn any of this shit. So you can't tell me what you know. You don't know this. And that's where it gets frustrating, because people try to tell you, like, you don't know my history. Now, if you would like me to tell you some places that you can go read some good books, and then we can come back and have a discussion. But don't just tell me like, no, that's not how it was. Yes, there's a lot of things that happen in this country that people don't know about, because you have to take the time to read. And we're busy people. Most people are just trying to get through their day to day, make enough money to take care of their family. Like, nobody's really sitting here trying to learn Black history in their spare time. But when you're confronted with it, either listen or shut up. Like, I can't.
Yeah, this country likes to keep us busy. They like to keep you busy.
God, so
it's hard to learn a lot of this stuff. What are some books you would recommend then? Like, if it's like to learn some Black history, because I think I heard you on a show say you read 30 books a year. Is that true?
No, I read 60 books a year. Ooh, last year I fell off. I only read about 48. I fell off at 48, but I read 60 books a year. This year I'm slacking though. I read 2 books this month, but that's all I read for the whole year. So I'm getting back into it. I'm gonna slide back into it because yeah, I love it. I love reading, like. Because I like I said, I felt
it's the best way
to
learn these days. Like, internet's cool,
really
but the internet's become such a fucking mess,
So for books, okay, so Darity's book From Here. So Sandy Darity, From Here to Equality, with Kirsten Mullen. That's a great book. That one would be my number 1. My number 2 is The Color of Money by Mirza Baradaran. That one, she gets into the Freedmen's Bureau. She goes over the whole history of banking and explains how Black banks were set up to fail and how white banks were propped up to succeed. So that's a really good one. After that, my next one that I would say to read would be When Affirmative Action Was White.
That's a good one.
Yes. And I think that's Ira Katz Nelson, right?
Ira Katz,
yeah. Ira Katz Nelson. So When Affirmative Action Was White, that is a really, really good book, because then you can understand the things that were given to white Americans throughout the years in this country. So you can understand that when Black Americans are asking for reparations, they're not asking for a handout, because there's so many things that we were excluded from. Because if we would have just been included in everything afterwards, like, let's just say slavery was over and they let us participate in the Homestead Act, they gave us if they would have gave us everything after that and left us alone, we wouldn't be asking for reparations, because we would have gotten the same things you did, but we didn't get what you got. So also Fear Itself by Ira Katz Nelson is a great book. And then for books for massacres, Buried in Bitter Waters. I can't remember the name of the guy who wrote it at this moment, but look it up, Buried in Bitter Waters. Read that one slow. It gave me PTSD. It took me like a while to read it. No, because it's all about racial cleansings in America. So you talked about how you didn't know about Tulsa until Watchmen, but there's Tulsa, there's Rosewood, there's the Colfax murders. There's so many. I think he went over Forsyth County, Georgia. They expelled the entire Black population from the county. They literally went door to door and told the Black people that they had to leave, and if they didn't, they would come back and kill them. Like, people don't understand what Black people have gone through in this country. Like, just imagine you're just sitting in your house that you built from the ground up, that your parents were your family, your grandparents were like slaves, or your parents were slaves, and you worked hard, bought some land, built a house. 3 generations of people are living in this house, and this mob comes to your house, knocks on your door, and tells you got to leave. And if we come back when the sun goes down, we're killing everybody. And for the people who stayed, they die. Like, that is what Black Americans went through in this country. And I think that's why Black people get so offended and frustrated when other racial groups try to lump themselves in. Like, well, we all experience discrimination. We all experience prejudice, yes, but we have not all experienced white racial terrorism on the level that Black Americans have experienced in this country. And it's like, people don't understand, like, this has gone on for us for generations. And like, the things that happen to other groups are unacceptable, but you don't hear of them like going in and like burning down like a town full of this minority. Like, the only other group that can actually talk about this are the Chinese. And that's a small group of them, because those are the ones that were here in the 1800s, because it happened to the Chinese as well. But outside of like, but by 1930s, 1940s, they got to like start being normal, except for the, you know, the shit that happened with the Japanese internment and all that. But even then, like I said, they've had their struggles as well. But like I said, but for other groups, like everybody can't have the same conversation. And then again, it goes into the difference between I guess lineage, right? So as a Black American, I'm a Black American who descends from, let me move. So I'm a Black American who descends from chattel slavery, right? I can trace 6 out of 8 of my ancestors to slave plantations. I can trace 2 of my ancestors to slave masters. So I am a direct descendant of slave masters and slaves. So for me, it's different because, like, as a person, like, my friend is Ghanaian American. Her parents come from Ghana. She's here. She's Ghanaian. So she's a Black American. She's a Ghanaian American. But our lineages are different, right? So then again, that's why when I say we could talk about that happening with the Chinese, but the group of people who were descendants in the 1800s of those Chinese people are not necessarily people who came here in the last 30, 40 years. So again, you can have a discussion, but it's about a particular group of people's discussion, not about Asians as a whole or Blacks as a whole. So that's what I just wanted to kind of flesh out a little bit there, because I know sometimes it's a lot for people because they don't understand the difference. They just think like, oh, well, you guys are just all one group. But it's like, yes, but then generationally it's different because we've been in this country for so many generations. By the time you get 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th generation, and that's the same thing with white Americans. A lot of white Americans are like German or Irish or this and that, but by the time you're like 5th, 6th generation, you guys aren't going home like that. You're not going back to like visit family, and so it's different. So if you were like, oh, I'm Italian, an Italian person would be like, you're Italian American.
Yeah, I tell people I'm Italian American. I don't tell people I'm Italian.
Yeah, because an Italian person would be like,
no.
So that's the
American
difference.
Thing,
yeah. So sorry, I know I went off on a tangent, but I feel like I'm trying to get people to it's nuanced, and I feel like little pieces people will start to understand the nuance.
No, your tangents are great. No, because you bring the important nuance that is indicative of this modern reparations movement, which is specifically for a certain lineage, and that's what I think is very different. The first time I kind of heard a lot of reparations talk was actually in the 2000s. There was this book published called they had it on the news a lot. It was called Debt or something like that. But it was this book, and then there was a lot of
debt.
The debt. And there was a lot of people chatting and talking. And one of the big questions was, well, who gets the reparations? And you know, and people like John McWhorter and Worther came and said, no reparations and stuff. And you know, Obama in the mid 2000s came out against reparations. So we haven't had that conversation since like nowish. But nowish, I notice. I'm not an expert. I'm just going off the top of my head. But nowish, I noticed the conversation of reparations seems to be very hot on who exactly gets it, which seems to be very different from the past. And that's where I think there's a lot of arguments within the Black community that I'm not obviously qualified to talk about. But
I'll flesh a little of that out for you.
Yeah. So that's.
Okay. So this is the thing. Okay. So think of reparations as a lawsuit, right? Well, let me just start off. So I'll give you the different things. So there are the people who are in my vein, right? Reparations should go to Black Americans who are descendants of chattel slavery in the United States, right? So it's like, well, how would you know that you're a descendant of chattel slaves? Because if you can trace your ancestry back to a slave plantation or person who was enslaved, or if you can trace your ancestry back to the 1870 census. Because that's the first census after slavery. Most people's names popped up on that. If your family members on that census, you count. After that, you had to have marked Black or African American on your legal data for the past 12 years. So we can keep from having $5 Negroes. I'm not going to get into that, but look up $5 groups.
Yeah,
and you'll be able to find that. So, because there's gonna be white people who be like,
Rachel Dolezal in there.
They're like, I'm 2% Black. I did a 23andMe. Give me my check. Nope, we're not. We are not doing. We're not doing. What's that stuff called? We're not doing the ancestry DNA stuff because that stuff is all wonky. Like my mother has 2 Black parents. My mother is extremely dark skinned, and my mother is like 38% Irish. So yeah, we're not doing anything.
You got some Irish in you. Holy
A
crap.
whole bunch, yeah. I refused to do mine. I was mad she did hers. I was like, now if I ever
Wow.
do something, you got my freaking DNA on file. They can familial match me.
Hey, watch. Yeah, you're in there now. They're gonna match you all over the place now.
Yeah, she got me all set up. But so that's one group. Then there's the Pan-Africans. So they're like, we should do global reparations.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, how? Okay, so we should do global reparations. Well, the United States didn't globally oppress all Black people. Like Europe oppressed some people, France oppressed the Dutch oppressed some people. Like there's different groups. So this is the best way that I like to explain it, because people really like to, but all Black people suffer. Yes, but you have to go to who harmed you, right? So think of reparations as a lawsuit or anything else, right? Or just say, right, you and your next door neighbor, right? Your house burns down. You have State Farm. Your house burns down this week, right? Your neighbor's house burns down 3 weeks later. So you got State Farm. Your neighbor has, I don't know, Mercury or whatever the fuck else, right? Y'all don't file y'all claims together. It's just that simple. It's two different properties. It's two different claims. You have two different companies that you have to go to for your money. Y'all don't come together. It happened at different times, different places. You don't come together and say, oh, we should file together and get our insurance money. It doesn't work like that. It's the same with reparations. It's really that simple.
Yeah, you mentioned the Japanese and the Chinese like before. So imagine if like the Japanese and Chinese people marched together for like Asian rights or something like that. No, the Japanese got their own reparations in '88,
Exactly.
signed by a Republican, by the way, and
Exactly.
the Chinese got their own schemes, and now they own like every shop on the block, right? Mm-hmm. So like that's
no, everybody exactly. No, that's a perfect example. When they did reparations for the Japanese internment,
Separately.
It was only for Japanese Americans. It was not for all Asian Americans.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
That is true, and I think that.
And the generation after fought for those reparations, right? So it's like it's the same thing, and that was I mean, $20,000 for family is for
in the 80s
for a what was it like 6 months in in an internment facility, similar to what we have in like ICE right now. Is like I'm not downplaying anything, but it's probably a fair reparation, right? I mean, and a Republican president signed this, so this is. I don't want to turn it into politics, but this is one very interesting thing about you and this concept of reparations being like ADOS or only like American descendants. That's where some of the Republicans or some people will criticize you guys of being like right-wingers. You guys are anti-immigrant.
That's where we get criticized as being right-wing. Yeah.
And that's where I think a lot of Republicans might be like, oh, they might sniff and get into, and that's where maybe the movement might get tainted a little bit. So I have also noticed that people like, oh yeah, I'm for reparations, but I'm not into ADOS, and I'm like, is it just a term, or is it like an actual movement, and are people call it far right?
So this is weird, right? So there is.
It's very weird.
So ADOS is American Descendants of Slavery, right?
Yes.
It is still a movement. How it started off, it was supposed to be like a leaderless movement. So there was a lot of people who created chapters, and there's just different things. But now that
it's like Black Lives Matter kind of.
Yes, but now that the leader wants to do something else, now they have their own ADOS headquarters. So a lot of people who used to identify as ADOS have left the movement, but are still doing reparations work. So you'll see people calling themselves freedmen. You'll see ADOCS, American Descendants of Chattel Slavery. So the groups are still out there. But the hashtag ADOS has broken up. So the problem with that is like anything, right? You're on the internet, people are angry, people are frustrated, and people kind of latch on to what they latch on to, right? So you're going to have people who just latch on and get stuck on the whole immigrant thing. Like that's the only thing that's going on. That happens in every group, right? And you can go and be like, no, you need to calm down. Like I block people. Like, nope, not on my Twitter. Like I don't have like it. That's all. But that's all you can really do, right? Like you can't really police the internet. So all you can really do is when you see it, be like, I don't condone that. This some BS. You should take it off and block them. Like so, like there was a period of time where people were doing block alerts and stuff like that. But like I said, you can't police the internet. But I will go this far, and I'm gonna tread lightly. But part of the thing is people do not like for Black Americans who descend from chattel slavery to talk about how immigration affects us. It's a very touchy issue for them because everybody is just like, well, you should just care about immigration because they're Black and brown. But the thing about it is we all compete for the labor. So when these groups move in, they move into our communities and we compete for labor with them. So you have kids in Los Angeles, Black kids who go and try to get jobs at McDonald's and they can't get a job because they don't speak Spanish. So I don't want to get super deep into it because, you know,
treading lightly.
Yeah, like I said, I'm treading lightly because, like, when I talk about immigration, I like to go through the history. Because when I talk about immigration, I actually like to start with the Irish. I like to start with white people because I can show you like all the tactics and then like other things that have happened. Like, if you look up what happened in Boyle Heights, like they were bombing Black people. A Black family moved into a Latino community and they were bombing them. And I'm not saying that this happens frequently, but there has been incidences. So my issue is, and it's not that all immigrants are Latinos either. But what I'm saying is it's a very nuanced conversation. So when you start talking about bringing people in to a group that has nothing, who has no opportunities, who has no jobs, barely has homes, more than 50% of homeless people in America are Black. We're only 14% of the general population. Crazy, yeah. So you have to understand, like, we're all for immigration, but you got to fix us first. Like, but you can't keep saying, well, you know, in their countries, it's dangerous. In their countries, there's no opportunity. In their countries, they have to worry about, you know, if they're going to get killed or this and that. That sounds like Black kids in the hood. So I need you to have that same compassion for the Black kids in the hood who are getting shot at, who have to worry about education and have to worry about being able to get jobs and have to worry about being able to do something with their lives. And I also need you to care about the Black kids in cages because they've been locking our kids up at 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 for 20, 30, 40 years for decades, and y'all ain't been crying at the jails. So I just need the same type of compassion. If I can get the same kind of compassion for everybody, my compassion will run for everybody. Because I grew up multicultural, but I need other groups to start caring about my people too. Because everybody wants Black people's hearts to bleed for everybody else. And you want us on the front lines fighting for you at all times, but you're not on the front lines fighting for us and our children. And that's what we need. Like,
they need your energy.
I need to see some real solidarity.
They need your energy. You say that all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, they do. It's some vampire shit. Like I'm trying to be nice.
Yeah, you're being really nice. It's so interesting to see this side of you versus how you are on Reset Race.
Okay,
this is really good. No, I love it. You're offering counterpoints.
You're gonna have to come visit us on our show.
Oh shit! I would love to. You guys are awesome.
Because when I go on other people's show, I give them the tame version.
Yeah, no, it's great. This is awesome. You're offering counterpoints. That's all you're doing. And like reparations people, it seems like you all have to have these points at like the back of your head. You have to. That's the funniest thing about Darity and Mullen's book. I found this the funniest thing because I don't read like 60 books a year, but I try to read a lot. Most books are formatted like they'll lay out their case and then the counterpoints would be at the end. Like you could tell Darity and Mullen know white people or something because right at chapter 2, they lay out the counterpoints. And I'm like, I've never seen a book formatted like that. So they give a brief introduction. Then chapter 2 is like, all right, I know you're probably thinking this is not going to happen. So here's common cases against reparations and here's some counterpoints. And then it kind of cleanses your brain and then he lays out the case. So it's just funny how you guys do have to have like more counterpoints in your head than actual points. It's like we
have to know everything.
You're always on defense.
Well, yeah, we have to because like I said, like it's a lot. Like to sit and have people like, oh, you're xenophobic, oh, you hate immigrants, and you're just laughing because like little if you know like my best, I got some of my besties over here, and the worst part is they're right wing.
Yeah, a lot of them are. Yeah,
like because I be trying to have these immigration conversations. I was like, okay, well, how about this? I was like, how about we let everybody stay? The whole 22 million. They say it's 11, but we know it's like 22. I was like, we give the whole 22 citizenship, and after that, no more birthright citizenship. Cut it. If you are not born to an American citizen from that point on, you got to go through the hoops, file the paperwork, and it is what it is. And you know what? My Mexican homegirl whose mother came here illegally who she was literally born and got birthright citizenship through her mother coming here illegally. She said, who the fuck said the whole 22 million should stay?
Well, yeah, that's why I like talking to you, because I said it a couple of times. You know real America, and like when you talk to real people on the normal like burbs or any streets or anything, like most people can be a little kind of conservative about a lot more things than media wants to put off. Like you go to like Springfield, Mass, like like I go up to Springfield, and you go to some of these cities, and you would think like they don't believe a lot of this lefty stuff. A lot of them might have like very religious upbringings. They might really like Christianity or whatever. They might like hard work, or they might like just really like traditional like American value, and
Values.
that's like you don't really hear that. And a lot of the like hardworking immigrant, that whole stereotype, that's not a left wing like thing. So like we hear the left wing, and this is what I'm trailing off. We hear the left perspective a lot, like, but we don't really hear that a lot of communities in America don't really want the government knocking at their door, giving them another program. They might just want some cash, or they might want a job. That tends to be, well, you're a right winger, but these people are very patriotic. They're the most patriotic American like people, but people call that conservative. Like people really want to push the culture to the left, because I think the left has always had an idea of compassion, right? Bleeding heart. We want to be good. We want to be peaceful, open up. They have the black community like really strong. They have 80%. They have it.
Republicans are racist, because most black people are culturally conservative. Like if you deal with most black people who are like from the South, like they are culturally
even up here,
conservative.
they're very culturally conservative.
Like even with me, I think I'm somewhat culturally conservative. I'm just fiscally, I'm
especially with the gay issue. Talk to your black friend about like homosexuality, folks, and let me know what they like. Just honestly, like
I feel like we're getting better, but I do have a grandmother who is like, I love you and I will not hate you for that, but I am not going to say that I'm okay with it. And but she's fucking 80.
My mom would do that too.
She's 80 years old. I'm not fighting with Grandma Coles.
That's just a conservative American thing. It's just old school.
She's not gonna be mean to you. She's not gonna be disrespectful. But she was telling me like, I don't like the fact that you live with a man and you're not married. So come on.
Oh, that shit.
So you understand what I'm saying? So she throwing bows everywhere. Yeah. So like old black conservatives will hit everybody.
Yeah,
like they don't care. Yeah. So that's.
But they vote Democrat. They're mostly liberal.
The reason why they vote Democrat is because Republicans have been so outwardly racist over the years.
30,
if Republicans would change their approach, and two, I think a lot of it is that group is just going to die out. Because when you start talking to younger people, I feel like that millennial range, I feel like they're more free agents. I feel like some of them like, okay, we'll listen to what both sides have to say. Like, who's going to give me a better offer? So I think over the next few years, the politics will change. But to be honest, I still don't think what we need is going to come through electoral politics, because they've already told us on the left and on the right that they don't care what we think or what we want. I feel like what we need is going to come through general strikes. That's the only time I need white people to channel their ancestors and not lynch black people. But I need y'all to get out here and go back to fighting with these corporations like I used to do, because y'all was tough during them labor struggles. Like,
they stormed the Capitol, though.
Oh my God.
They stormed the Capitol. How about this with that energy?
So this is the thing, but for the wrong reason. Y'all should have stormed the Capitol because they didn't give us checks. You shouldn't have stormed the Capitol because you thought the election results was fraudulent. You know how many times we had to have fraudulent elections? Then they stuffed the ballots with JFK. Like, this is as American as apple pie. Like, it's just terrible, right? Like, this has been going on forever. Not that I believe it one way or the other, but I was like, that's not what they should have been out there fighting for. They need to be fighting for the money. And I think you made a good point about how a lot of people don't want a whole bunch of programs. In a way, I'm kind of with you. Like, let's do the federal jobs guarantee and let's do this universal basic income. I'm for other programs after that, but those other programs I like to be optional. Like, I'm for free housing for all. I think they should knock that out. But I don't think that anybody should have to give up their house. Like, I own a house. My great-grandmother left me my house. Do I think I should necessarily have to give up my house? I personally don't care. But for the greedy people, I'm going to pretend I'm a greedy fucker. So, yeah, no, I shouldn't have to. But for those of you who want to go live somewhere nice for free, and they should be nice. It should be nice communities. There should be great public transportation that's free. There should be everything you need with the federal job. And it should be so nice that the rich fuckers, or not maybe not the rich fuckers, but the middle class people who have really been, trying so hard to hold on to keeping their kid in a good school district, they can just let that fucking house, sell that shit or let it go and go live in the nice new place that's free. And for all the rich people who don't want to live around us peasants, you don't have to.
You're touching on a lot of really good stuff.
Perfect world.
You're touching on a lot of really good stuff. I only say that about programs because I've lived through this country.
Because those means testing of the programs is what's bullshit. All programs should just be universal.
The mean test, and that means you need a staff member, and that's the thing. Like when I hear there's somebody sitting at the desk making whatever. Somebody's got to press the button. Somebody's got to answer the phones, and somebody's got to show up to your house or whatever. Or you got to whip out a gray card at the supermarket and feel ashamed and stuff So there's all these extra things that a lot of the white liberals, they might say this stuff online or on their podcasts or whatever, but they might not have lived it. I want to ask these kids, have the Jacobin kids that you're always flaming. Have you ever applied for an FHA loan? Have you ever gone to the unemployment office? Have you ever applied for food stamps? Have you ever applied for anything that isn't a scholarship? Have you ever been arrested? Have you ever gone to a courthouse? Have you ever gone through this country? Have you ever sat in the back of the police?
Have you lived a lower middle class life?
Yeah.
Have you lived a life? Yeah.
And when you see this shit, you realize I don't want more government. When you see how powerful these pencil pushers are, but I don't mind, these stimulus checks, I don't mind opening up my bank app and seeing some cash coming from Uncle Sam.
Yeah, I'm not mad at it at all.
I don't mind that.
I'm all for wealth redistribution too. So I'm one of the. So this is the thing.
Yeah, you're pretty liberal on your show. I want to say that you're very liberal.
I want reparations because y'all owe me my money, but I'm all for wealth redistribution because I don't want a bunch of poor white people running around either. I need y'all to be stable and happy so I can feel safe.
The poor white thing is a bit. People, I guess, obviously don't want to talk about it, but yeah, it's a real fucking problem in this country. In a lot of towns, even a lot of my upper middle class white buddies are gone now from the heroin stuff. So a lot of them, there's a lot of complicated vibes going on in this country with white. There's a reason why the white kids that are shooting everybody and raping everybody and doing it's a really fucked. But I think people don't want to talk about it because it might seem sympathetic. I don't know. This might be hard for me to word, but it's they could be rallied to the cause a little bit, instead of shit. But you're right. The conversation of the poor white really hasn't been a thing. And sometimes you watch those old documentaries and stuff, and you see the poor white Jewish guy or the poor white guy with a pipe on the side of the road with the black guy, and in the old days, and that kind of coalition, those are the Americans. These are the people that fight the wars. These are the people that build the bridges, that run the shops. The upper class, they just they move digits around and computers and stuff. They just move things around, whereas the lower class is what really builds this country. And we've really gotten fucked in the ass, particularly for the past 30, 40 years. In America, it's a great country. If you're upper middle class or rich, it's going to be the fucking paradise. But if you're lower, it's hell on earth, and there's no middle anymore. So redistribution solves that, but reparations solves that as well. And that's why I see it, especially after engaging with your guys' channel and these new arguments and stuff, I see it as a no-brainer. I see it damn, this is a good, especially after these stimulus checks. I think in the 2000s, people used to say, okay, how's this going to work? Now that I've seen wow, they passed a stimulus bill 5 days later, I got money, there's no inflation. We've had Keynesian economics. Obama started this, say what you want about him. He started the stimulus idea in 2008, the idea of spending. And we've just been spending trillions since then, and we haven't had inflation. So how to do reparations seems pretty easy now. We've seen the stimulus. So now I think that argument, so to me, it seems like a no-brainer.
That is the best thing that ever happened for reparations, right? Because people would always be like, you know why? Because this is my favorite statement. People well, you can't just throw some money at it. A check won't help. And I'm well, if checks won't help, then why the hell did we just send every American money? If checks don't help, why did we just send them some fucking free college, a housing voucher, and
Well, that's the thing going on in Illinois right now. If you're on Twitter, it's like they call it
Yes.
reparations. It's really a housing voucher. That's another thing. I was
And it's annoying too because it's not just for descendants of chattel slavery, it's for all Black Americans. So you could have got
okay.
here after the Cosby show. You could have showed up like in 1989 and you be a Black person and you can get that boon that was for redlining, even though redlining was over.
Yikes.
I don't like that. And I say that all the time. And when people are like, oh, well, you're just anti-Black immigrants. I'm like, no, I'm not, because my next door neighbors are Mexican immigrants and they got here in the 70s. And our families have been living next door to each other since the 70s. And why should you get a check or why should you get something and them not get it? Because y'all are the same. Like, you're not a descendant of chattel slavery, so you're literally just getting something because you're Black. But your family didn't endure the pain of what happened. So no, it doesn't work like that.
Some people bring up, like, say what you want about Clubhouse, but in some of these Clubhouse rooms where there's a lot of talk about reparations, some people bring up really good points about that, like on how some of these affirmative action programs were about having more Black people in universities. So, like, in Trinidad, they do free education. They'll pay for your college if you want to be a nurse. So a lot of Black people would in Trinidad would become a nurse and then come up to America and get those quotas when perhaps those quotas were actually designed for maybe African Americans. Now, I'm not blaming any politician or blaming. Perhaps the politicians don't foresee these, but after decades and decades of policies that have not worked, like, okay, maybe these policies have benefited like white women more. Maybe these policies have benefited immigrants more. Like, how the hell are the Indians number one now? Like, sometimes I wonder that. And so I feel like sometimes reparations is easy because it's just, instead of some complicated scheme where people are going to work around, it's just like, boom, like,
And you
cash.
just pay who you owe, right? Because then, like you said, it's not a complicated scheme. You don't have to sit here and go and be like, what percentage Black are you? Are you a Black descendant of child slavery? Are you this? Are you that? Like, no, that makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense, especially too because, okay, so I'm actually against affirmative action. I did a whole spiel on this.
Okay.
when I was in my philosophy class. But the reason why I'm against affirmative action is because if you go back and you watch the LBJ video at Howard, when he's introducing affirmative action, he's talking to Black student body, and he's talking about how you can't just let people out to start a race that's already been going without giving them something to get them where they can catch up.
Our earth is the home of revolution. In every corner of every continent, men charged with hope contend with ancient ways in the pursuit of justice. They reach for the newest of weapons to realize the oldest of dreams, that each may walk in freedom and pride, stretching his talents, enjoying the fruits of the earth. Our enemies may occasionally seize the day of change, but it is the banner of our revolution they take. And our own future is linked to this process of swift and turbulent change in many lands in the world. But nothing in any country touches us more profoundly, and nothing is more freighted with meaning for our own destiny than the revolution of the Negro American. In far too many ways, American Negroes have been another nation, deprived of freedom, crippled by hatred, the doors of opportunity closed to hope. In our time, change has come to this nation too. The American Negro, acting with impressive restraint, has peacefully protested and marched, entered the courtroom and the seats of government, demanding a justice that has long been denied. The voice of the Negro was the call to action. But it is a tribute to America that once aroused, the courts and the Congress, the President, and most of the people have been the allies of progress. Thus, we have seen the High Court of the country declare that discrimination based on race was repugnant to the Constitution and therefore void. We have seen in 1957 and 1960 and again in 1964 the first civil rights legislation in this nation in almost an entire century. The Voting Rights Bill will be the latest and among the most important in a long series of victories. But this victory, as Winston Churchill said of another triumph for freedom, is not the end. It is not even the beginning of the end. But it is perhaps the end of the beginning. That beginning is freedom. And the barriers to that freedom are tumbling down. Freedom is the right to share fully and equally in American society, to vote, to hold a job, to enter a public place, to go to school. It is the right to be treated in every part of our national life as a person equal in dignity and promise to all others. But freedom is not enough. You do not wipe away the scars of centuries by saying now, you are free to go where you want, now do as you desire, and choose the leaders you please. You do not take a person who for years has been hobbled by chains and liberate him, bringing up to the starting line of a race, and then say, you are free to compete with all the others, and still justly believe that you have been completely fair. Thus, it is not enough just to open the gates of opportunity. All our citizens must have the ability to walk through those gates. And this is the next and the more profound stage of the battle for civil rights. We seek not just freedom, but opportunity. We seek not just legal equity, but human ability. Not just equality as a right and a theory, but equality as a fact and equality as a result. For the task is to give 20 million Negroes the same chance as every other American to learn and grow, to work and share in society, to develop their abilities, physical, mental, and spiritual, and to pursue their individual happiness. To this end, equal opportunity is essential, but not enough. Men and women of all races are born with the same range of abilities. But ability is not just the product of birth. Ability is stretched or stunted by the family that you live with and the neighborhood you live in, by the school you go to and the poverty or the richness of your surroundings.
So he's talking to black people. He wasn't talking to white women. He wasn't talking to Latinos. He wasn't talking to all of these other groups that have come after this speech and been able to get affirmative action. You understand what I'm saying? Like,
I see. That was his target.
Yeah, so it was supposed to be for Black Americans it was supposed to be the Black Americans who were descended from child slavery, the Black Americans who had went through all of the things. So now affirmative action is for everybody, but for white men. And that's why it keeps getting struck down everywhere. Because if I was a white man, if I was just a regular white dude, I'd be pissed. I'm like, I'm not rich. I don't fucking oppress anybody. Like, but everybody else just gets affirmative action because they're not a white man. Like their families, there's no oppression that had to happen in their family. They just have to like show up here and they count.
Yeah, like upper caste Indians who will take the untouchables. Yeah, yes. The Brahmins will come over and like assume they're coming over from like a poor country when they're more rich than anyone. Yeah. No, there's a lot of that. The craziest
thing is the Brahmins come over here and they discriminate against the lower caste of Indians as well. There's been articles written about that happening where they can't even like move up and stuff. So it's like you leave India to escape this caste system, and these people come here and bring it with them. That's terrible.
Yeah, they're coming to the American society. They're fitting right in, right?
And this is why we hate Kamala.
People have tried to do a caste analysis of American society quite a bit, especially like old 20th century sociology. People are like trying to figure out race and like class, and people try to make it caste. I think it's a pretty poor analysis. I just think America is a race analysis. I think caste kind of makes it complicated. I definitely know what they're trying to get at, but a caste system
we do have a caste system just because a black colored Indian can come here as a Brahmin and be a CEO. So it's not race, it's still a caste system because that saying, Black American descendant of chattel slavery can't necessarily, like Obama. Obama is black as in Kenyan, and then his mother was white. So he was able to ascend to a certain level because he doesn't fall into that caste system. Kamala Harris is the same way. Her father is Indian, Jamaican, Brahmin, and then her mother is a Brahmin Indian.
See, this is something I'm not allowed to say on my show or anything, so we bring on Sam to say these things. But these are honest discussions. But here's the thing I keep coming back to is that you can't say this type of stuff on the left today. You can't.
Oh, they kill you. They hate me.
Yeah,
I don't care, though.
But the problem is that's the only side that's doing anything right now. All the Republicans talk about are fucking whatever, Dr. Seuss or whatever. They just want to cut this. There's no program.
Okay,
if they could get 20% of black people, those Republicans, you'd be set. Like, do something. Do the reparations. Like do something.
So I have this obsession with Mitt Romney, and I think I'm gonna start writing his office. I've been talking about it forever.
Mitt Romney?
I have this obsession with Mitt Romney. I swear. So I swear like George Romney wants me to help Mitt achieve his legacy.
George Romney was very pro-black up here. He was a big pro-black up here. Yeah.
He was
big
very pro. His career took a fall because he stood by black people. And I'm like, if Mitt Romney could come out, do reparations, and do wealth redistribution for the poor whites, he would be better than FDR and for the whites, and he would be better than freaking Lincoln for the blacks. I don't know. I'm gonna start writing his office. I'm gonna start writing like.
Yeah, why do you run the campaign? You should do it. Romney, imagine.
I know, right? But no, it's been for the past 6 to 8 months. Mitt Romney has been on my mind. I was like, I have to start writing him. I think it's his dad. I think his dad is
But that's the only Republican.
And he's a Mormon, and Mormons are very big on honoring their ancestors and all these other things. There's a lot of things that are very big in their religion when it comes to respect for ancestors and legacy and all these other things because they believe that they go through So yeah. So,
They don't believe it anymore, but you know what Mormons used to believe about black people, though, right?
Oh yeah, I know they think we're evil.
Some pretty fucked up shit.
But let me tell you, but I'm easy, right? So they have these family search centers all over the country where you can go to the Mormons and they'll like help you like research your ancestry and like find find all your ancestors and stuff.
Oh shit.
And the people that they have in there are so sweet and kind. They'll sit and help you. They'll give you hours. They'll like help you search stuff. So they just win you over. So like people are like, oh, what
They're
do you
the
think
nicest
of Mormons?
people you ever
Yeah,
meet.
when people are like, what do you think of Mormons? I'm like, for the regular ones, I think they're fucking awesome.
They're
like
the nicest people.
I'm not a religious person, so you being a Mormon is no different than you being a Christian or Buddhist or anything else to me. So as long as your religion makes you love and respect and treat people well, I'm with it. So my experiences with them, the normal ones, I know they got some dark shit but all religions do.
Yeah. It's always fun to look into the I have a fetish for like fundamentalists and stuff like that, like how they think and like what they're looking at. But no, I remember Romney in 2012. I mean, I actually, a lot of people thought he was going to beat Obama that year. I remember he had this one rally like a week before the election. There were like thousands of people there. I'm like, oh shit, is Mitt Romney going to win? But he didn't really run on anything.
I think he can be redeemed.
You think so? Yeah, well, he was the only Republican that was like really hardcore, like a lot of the Republicans have been really tainted by Trump now, and a lot of them are dealing with, like you say, the racism and the far right. But it's also interesting that a lot of, I don't want to sound like Dinesh D'Souza, like, oh, the Democrats are actually the racist KKK, but like, yeah, the modern Republicans are associated with the racists. But it's also interesting, like how Nixon did some of the black capitalism, how like, Trump's numbers about like black employment are like maybe not exactly what the narrative might say. Like Reagan signed the reparations. Like it's like sometimes you have to deal with your enemy. Like LBJ is a racist, a big racist, but sometimes sometimes you need these white guys to just like, all right, we're dealing with the racist, but sometimes you need to just.
I agree. That was my issue. That was my issue with the Black Caucus. When they were like, we're not going to meet with Trump. I was like, who the fuck doesn't meet with who's in power? What kind of sense does that make?
When the colleges met with him, things worked out.
Let me tell you, the Latinos met with him. Latinos got an economic empowerment act under Trump. The AAPI community got an economic empowerment act under Trump, and they have gotten them all the way back to Clinton. So when people say that you can't do things for specific races, that just means that you can't do it for black people and poor whites.
Well, they always love to lump, and I know I'm going over time a little bit, but this is just like really good. But you mentioned it a couple times, like they always like to lump you guys into something else, like BIPOC or something like that, like black and brown or something like that. But there's also like, there's so much divergence in the black community, right? There's like, like when I was studying jazz in school, like they would always say like the bougie versus the whatever, stuff like that. Like the jazz musicians were always arguing with each other about stuff like that. And like the whole concept of the mulattoes and like, yeah, you study that black history. Like even in the 1830s, some like free blacks like were against like abolition. So there's this complicated, like there's always a debate. Like and like Louis Armstrong was like, like he did like minstrel stuff and just made money, and he was like, I'm not going to participate in the civil rights because I'm making. But then like, so there's all these different voices, but then you have like militant
a lot going
civil
on.
rights, but people think it's like this one group and there's got to be like one leader. And I tell people like, name me 3 Japanese American like leaders, or name me 3 Jewish American leaders. Like you need some, but it's like there's like this idea that black people need to be led to with someone else, or they need a leader, or they need a Democratic Party to show them. It's like they always lump you guys in with someone else. I always wondered that. Like, and BIPOC is the new thing. On all my meetings now, whenever I meet with someone in LA right now, or I do anything for work, or I do a Zoom meeting, it's all BIPOC, everything. And I can't say, I'm a white man, you can't say anything, but it's like,
I hate it.
Even my favorite conservative comedian the other day.
You should do one of these. Excuse me. So my one black friend hates BIPOC.
Oh, my one black friend, yes, Sam Angela, yeah, that's a great card to pull.
She hates BIPOC. I hate BIPOC. I do. I hate it.
It's an interesting one.
Because
black people can't even get a day in this country,
We told you to stop calling us POCs, so then you still call us BIPOC. And it's like black still includes the whole diaspora. Can you just address us when you need to address us? Just talk about who you're talking about. That's it. Like if I'm talking about poverty in the Asian community, I need to talk about Vietnamese people. I need to talk about certain groups because those groups have poverty. Because there are rich Asians and there are poor Asians. But when you just lump them into one group, then we're not having those conversations. So.
Now, with the popular thing with reparations, when you start talking about reparations, and one of the big points is, well, then you have Native Americans. That's another thing that comes is like, if they accept, they say, okay, American descendants of slavery do have this unique position. I totally agree. But we should also. They always like to add in like Native American.
Yes.
A lot of points on your show were very interesting to me. And what has already been done for Native Americans so far. Like I live in the state where there's a couple. I'm not talking about the casinos, but they own the. They own the casinos and stuff at school, but like not stuff like that. But there's been land reform and thing. And another interesting point you made on your show, or one of your colleagues made, it was like their case is different. Their case is not economic as much as it is like negotiating treaties and land reform, because the white people just came in and said, hey, just put your thumb on this piece of paper, here's some beavers and this is mine. And then like, how? And then 20 years later, like, what the fuck, this is our land. So most of the Native American grievance is different. So when you lay that out, it's like, oh, okay, it's two different
sovereign.
Claims.
They're sovereign. They're their own nation. Black
but that's
Americans
what people say. In the hierarchy of oppression, it's Native Americans and Black. So if we're going to do reparations, let's also talk about Native Americans. That's the only point.
So this is the thing, but Native Americans, like Mud says all the time, in 1946, they did the Indian Claims Commission, where they tried to pay a lot of these tribes. Some people took money. Some people told them to go fuck themselves and that they wanted their land back. And a lot of these groups are still fighting to this day to get their land back. So for me, I have no issue with what you do for the Native Americans. That's none of my business. I believe that they should be taken care of, but I'm not going to get out here and say what they deserve or what they don't deserve. I'm not in their tribes. And for the tribes that my family were in, we've been expelled. So that's a whole different fucking conversation for a different day. So, because a lot of these tribes are expelling their Black members, because when the goodies come, they kick the Blacks out, so we don't get any. So we have complicated relationships. See, we have complicated relationships with all races of people.
Yeah.
We have very complicated relationships. So, but with them, like I said, I believe they should get what they're supposed to get. But my whole thing is, you can't be like Native Americans first. Native Americans have gotten things multiple times. It's time for you to deal with Black people as well.
I think part of it is definitely making that point, is that Black people have uniquely, I think everybody knows that they've been uniquely fucked over, but like even after all these historical points, it's like, wow, like it's like, yeah, I mean, even up this, like, we need to get these reparations paid. And then the last point, because I know I'm kind of going over time, I don't want to take up too much of your time. The last point.
Oh, you're fine. You're not bothering me.
The last point is we're here, we agree with the history, we agree with these points, the unique group of American descendants of slavery, and now the checkbook's out. Now we talk about cost. This is a very American point here. How much does it cost and who pays for it? Okay. I could see the old white guy saying, why should my tax dollars pay for this?
Yeah,
all right?
yeah.
So how do we get through that?
Your tax dollars don't pay for anything. They just
big misconception, isn't it?
They just pump the ones and zeros. Everybody reads Stephanie Kelton's The Deficit Myth, or actually YouTube her videos too. She's got some really good YouTube videos. She breaks it down as simple as Monopoly. Like that's how, like you can literally sit down with your 12-year-old and watch it, and your 12-year-old will understand MMT and how it works. So, but so Sandy Darity's number is 14 trillion. That would kind of that closes the racial wealth gap. So that kind of covers the 40 acres and a mule. I prefer Thomas Kramer with his 6.4 quadrillion, but I don't think we're gonna get there.
Hey. Kramer did add it up. Yeah. Right. He added it all up.
Because he went and he actually did like time, labor, the 40 acres and a mule and stuff like that. But so right now, like 14 trillion is kind of where it starts. But I would hope once they do,
it's a scary number for a lot of people.
But you
That's
think
the problem
so?
In this country.
If you think so, but when the crisis first started, they were giving $1 trillion a day to the banks, so they pumped out like 30 trillion in a month. So what are you talking about? And then too, like people act as if like Black people are gonna get all this money and we're just gonna like flee the country with it. Like Black people are gonna like start. Okay, most Black people, when they get reparations, it's not enough money for them to like retire and stop working. Like realistically, reparations, if it's 14 trillion, it would be roughly around like $372,000 per person. So For most people, if you have debt, you're, you might get like 200. If you pay off your debt, you'll have like 200K or something like that. 200K, depending on where you move, that might be a house somewhere. For somebody who had like a house and a decent job, that'll be a nice little set aside. But for a lot of people, that's just going to be enough money for people to pay down some debt, maybe buy a house, maybe, and make a couple investments just to be comfortable, maybe start a college fund for kids, little shit. It's not like, if you think about it, that's not a lot of money. Like, yes, it's like, oh, yes, it's a lot because it's coming at once. But when you really think about it, most people are not quitting their jobs. So that's money for people to start a business. So people will be starting new business. This is going to stimulate the economy. For people who own businesses, white people, y'all own the majority of the shit. Like, these are people who are going to be coming in to go to your restaurants, spend more money with you, all of that stuff. It's just going to stimulate the economy. Like, it really is. So that's
totally see it. Yeah. It makes my mouth water thinking about the tax revenue that would come in.
I'm telling you. And you know what? So a lot of white people have been like, they like the idea of a tax credit. And I was like, I didn't hate the tax credit idea. They were like 80,000 for 10 years in the tax credit. I was like, bet I could do that.
Yeah, that's a very Milton Friedman kind of thing. Yeah, that's more of a libertarian thing. Yeah, but the stimulus spending seems pretty popular now, though, as a concept.
I do like the stimulus stuff. I do like the whole idea of you just sending me a check.
Well, because inflation's not going. I mean, if you're the number one economy in the world, like obviously, if like the Zimbabwe prints a lot of money, the inflation, that's a sad situation, unfortunately. But like as the number one economy in the world, like as a debtor nation, it's like we haven't. People don't understand economics. It's like if we haven't had inflation yet, we could just kind of keep doing this. Stephanie Kelton goes into it. It's like, our generation was just raised that the government has to, if your house has to balance our checkbook, then our government has to balance your checkbook or her. And like Reagan will like cut $2 billion of welfare, but then he'll spend $2.3 billion in military, like tax cuts. Yeah. So it's like we're still in a deficit. So it's like the government doesn't work that way. It's like, it's such people don't, and if you don't understand economics, like my mouth is watering thinking of like, I would be so proud as an American to give our most oppressed group after all this bullshit so much money to actually take themselves without having to fill up some bullshit form with like some 20-year-old liberal at the office, like, like feel bad for him, like just give them the money and let them do what we know black people can do. They create the best music, create the best clothes, create the best businesses, create the best everything, create the best culture. I mean, what the hell is K-pop right now? It's black culture. Like, come on, like fucking A, like the best culture in the world. Everything they're going to make, like the Dave Chappelle joke was right. Like Dave Chappelle had a joke about reparations. He's like, all right, after we pay reparations, the top 10 on Forbes list is just going to be my buddies from the block or whatever. Like, because you got black people are American. They're more Americans than anyone. They built the whole country. So it's like to see our most hardworking, like patriotic people get that money and see what they're going to do. Like finally, they're going to rebuild their communities. Whatever they spend, it's going to go through property tax. They're going to get tax revenue. It's going to go to the school. They're going to have that money to do whatever they want, build a business. And it's like, it makes me excited to have so many Americans have that purchasing power. But that perspective, and that's like a capitalist perspective too. That's not like socialistic. That's a very capitalist mindset.
I always try to appeal to people where they're at, right? Because like I'm a Star Trek person. Like I want Star Trek minus space travel because I don't care about space travel unless the rich oligarch assholes want to leave. Then they can go. Like, I'm fine with that. But for me, I'm good here on the ground. But yeah, so I'm over there. But I just like to appeal to people where they're at because when you start getting that far off, it just feels too far-fetched for people. But for me, I'm like, we need to start thinking about the world that we want to live in because, like, I don't want to raise kids poor in this world the way it is, because this is like I said, I feel like we're not too far from like Hunger Games and Mad Max. Like I tell people all the time, and I will not be putting my child up for tribute. Like
look at any city in this country right now. Like it's drive through it. Like it's basically Mad Max. Like
even
people
where
don't.
I live.
You go on you wake up, your New York Times, your Washington Post. Like you're living in Scotland. You want to learn about America. You don't fucking know. Like you got to drive through like. It's a hell right now. Like these people that are writing these articles are living in comfortable apartments. They have trust fund. Their parents are giving them a couple thousand every year. Like they're not like you don't hear the perspective of the real people in this country much anymore. People are really hurt and they're dying. $1,400 is not like that's
nothing.
gone.
Oh,
that's
that
bills.
Was gone. I spent it on my. I spent
Come
it on
on.
my light bill was behind my light power water, so I paid that, and I paid my what was it, my gas bill. That was
Yeah.
$1,300. So I got
It's
a
yeah.
whole $100 bump
That's the
from
thing.
the stimmy.
The country's
I got to
hurting.
like
Country's
and
hurting.
even where I live, right? So I live in the hood.
California. Right?
Yeah, I live in Watts. Like I live in Watts. Like my family's been in the neighborhood for forever. My family's been in the neighborhood since the 50s. So and like I've never felt uncomfortable walking until now. Like I can't even walk around my neighborhood. People keep getting shot. Like
Shit.
I've been gone for 3 weeks, and in 3 weeks that I've been gone, I've got multiple calls. There's been like 3 or 4 shootings within my neighborhood, like within where I live. So it's just like
Maslow's hierarchy, man. It's economic. Like people remember back in the day, people were like, "Oh, well, this is because of black this, black that. This is because of this." But no, it's just Maslow's hierarchy. I've traveled to a lot of countries, poor neighborhoods. They're all the same. Like if you just give people that economic floor, a lot of that stuff's gonna go away. But people just don't get it. They're like, let's do this,
how are
let's
people
do
supposed
that.
to feed their families?
You
And that's
need
what
money.
it really boils down to, right? Like you closed all these businesses, you shut all this stuff down, you told people to stay home, and then you didn't give them any money. Like what were they supposed to do to feed their children?
Yeah, and the neighborhoods are very gentrified, you know. So like, and there's like I said, like I grew up in a pretty interesting, like I guess like Hey Arnold, this kind of neighborhood, like Polish and all these Europeans everywhere. But like we didn't, the black neighborhood was different. But like, where did we get our weed from? Is like a certain part of the neighborhood. So it's like the neighborhoods are set up that way. That's the thing. So like we got our weed from a certain side of the neighborhood, but we didn't think about that as like kids, you know. But now that like you're adult, you think of the policies of like, even though it's a poor neighborhood, the black people are all in some area or one area, and like that's every city in this country. That's like and it's like people. You tell people that on the outside, they don't really get it. Like all the public schools, like in my state, there's West Hartford, which is where all the rich people live, and there's really nice schools, and you drive. It's like, where the fuck am? It's like and then you go to East Hartford, where Betsy DeVos, Trump's Secretary of Education, said it was one of the worst high schools she's ever seen in the country. And literally, like,
right there,
right there. And it's like
crossing the tracks.
It's hard to even process. When you're a kid, you're like, oh, I'm just going to go, or your politician will say, oh, we're going to put this program. But then you realize, like, wow, this is like really, this is decades of stuff. No program. And like, if you see the homeless people right now, and this is like, geez, no program's going to solve this. Like all this shit, like nothing's going to solve any of this unless besides cash. It's like, I feel like it's at the point where like things are so bad, like, you know, in the 60s were when we were supposed to try a lot of this shit, and now we're in the 2020s, and I think now the only solution is just to get that cash in the hands of people and let it. They don't want to hear.
Like I said, I love cash. I'm all for a UBI and a federal jobs guarantee. I think those things they need those ASAP. I still want my damn reparations.
But you don't like Andrew Yang.
Okay, so I don't like Andrew Yang because he's a not neolib. He's like a libertarian. Like first of all, $1,000 a month isn't shit. Get the fuck out of my face. Like, think about it. Like, okay, so you giving me, I still can't pay all my bills with that $1,000. Like, you're basically like giving me enough money to make sure I pay my creditors. So you're not helping me, you're helping them. Like, it's not extra food money. You understand what I'm saying? Like, so first of all, if Andrew Yang would have came out and been like UBI $3,000 a month, I would have been like, yeah, okay. But he started off with like some bullshit ass number, and people like, well, you're not supposed to be able to live off it. No, you need to give me enough money that these coal miners who are never gonna fucking get a job again can fucking pay their mortgage and send money to their grandkids. Okay? That's what I want, because they're not gonna be retrained. And you can do a federal jobs guarantee, but if they get a job, it's going to be some bullshit. They're going to like sit around and like read to old people or some shit. They're not going to do anything like brand new and innovative because they're old and they're not going to learn new shit. And why the fuck should they? I'm not learning how to code at 60.
Well, some of those neighborhoods, like some of those neighborhoods, $1,000 a month might be all right. Like some states,
but
some
it's not
places
enough,
in America,
though. Like, come on, we got to do better than this for Americans, though. Can we stop giving Americans the bare minimum? Like, you got people who are pushing like being trillionaires, and we're talking about $1,000 a month. No, give people enough money that they can save a little bit of money, put up a little bit of money. give their kids a little bit of money for something. Like, that's the whole American dream, right? Like, for most of the American dream, it's like, you want to buy a house,
Have a
you want to
house,
go on
yeah.
vacation, and you want to be able to put your kids through college, but I'd like for college to be free. So instead of that, sorry. This is stupid. I'm like, why did this thing just... No, hold on. And it's gonna do it again to me too. It's a stupid Twitter timer. I was like, I'm not even on Twitter. What's going on?
Oh shit! Get off.
But if people just want to be able to do a little bit of something nice for their kids and their grandkids, like people want to put a little money down on a house or give a car. That's why I say give them the little bit of extra money, because some of those people are gonna save it, and then people are on different levels, right? So the people who have a house, they're going to have a little bit more and they're going to be able to save it. But let's just say you're like someone who's older, shit happened, you lost your house, That's enough money for you to get a house. That's enough money for you to still be able to stay where you grew up. And then from there, we can start building in these communities. And then people who want to stay in these small towns that they were born in don't have to leave. Because I'm from the city. Well, I'm from the suburbs. I grew up in the suburbs of LA in Moreno Valley, but my family's from a small town in Arkansas. If it was up to me, I would live in a small town. Like, I like country living, and I see the value in it. Oh, sorry. There we go. I got it this time. Boom.
Boom.
Hold on. Ignore. I got it. Now I got it this time. Ignore limit for the day. Okay, perfect. Sorry about that. But I see the value in small town living, and I think you should be able to give people the option who want to stay, who want to just live in a small town and raise their kids with those kind of values, but give them opportunities still. Like, there should still be good schools, there should be jobs, there should be opportunities, and that could all be provided through the federal jobs guarantee. But I don't want people to, I feel like you have to give people enough money. Like, I always say at least $2,000. I feel like $3,000 would be better, but a minimum of $2,000. Because at least with an extra $2,000, if you have a job, you can do something with it. But I feel like $3,000 would be better. Because like I said, in the richest country in the world, why not?
No, it makes sense. Yeah, I mean, ambitious. It's an ambitious goal. Yeah, but reparations first.
Reparations first, damn it. If I don't get reparations, everybody can drown. Like I tell people all the time, fuck your kids.
Fuck them kids. Fuck the kids? Yeah.
Well, yeah, no, you say the American dream, but like, I mean, whoops. Oh, sorry, I just dropped my mouse. Let me pick that up. Oh, jeez. No, sorry. You say the American dream, but like, Black Americans in general have not been. Let me talk.
Everybody have it, yeah.
Black Americans have not, in general, been able to get that American dream. But how about when people have their because part of white privilege is being able to, as you say, being able to. My mouse is all fucked up. Being able to curate the Black people around you. So so you have a white friend that finds, hey, I listened to Glenn Lowry, I listened to
oh Lord,
I listened to Lil Wayne, all these, I listen to all these rich, these Black people that say, hey, everything's fine,
Well, it's great for them; they're rich.
Larry, well, that's the thing. Like Larry Elder says, all this stuff. So there is this whole market, there is this whole idea, and even the lefties do it. Like the lefties will have their oon token, like they'll bring on Adolph Reed, or they'll have their own favorite Black people to bring on.
We love beating up Adolph Reed.
You do. I love it, yeah. You exposed me to a lot of these people. It's fun. I kind of like political drama. I kind of love, like, Black politics is fun, like, because there's a lot of there's a lot of great thinkers. Like, some of our best intellectuals in the history of this country have always actually been Black people. People don't realize, especially in like universities, people don't realize that. Like, our best professors, like some of our best intellectuals are like Black people. And no matter what they study, a lot of them get into Black politics. Like Lowry and McWhirter and like Reed, they don't really talk in their subject area, but they'll show up on a podcast once in a while, and it's like it's fun to watch them like battle. But like at the end of the day, it's like the podcasters or whatever. Like, people can accuse me of doing this because I picked you, but like you can pick the Black around you. Like when I was DMing you on Twitter, I told you, like, when I grew up, I thought I knew stuff. I watched Fresh Prince, I watched Bill Cosby. You watch this, you watch Herschel Walker, whatever. Like maybe 10 years ago, we have a Black president, everything's fine. So a lot of people have this idea, well, Black people are fine by now and all that stuff, and like
we've arrived.
Yeah, that's, and even, well, LBJ, that funny guy, he said, now we're healing the last chain of slavery, or they all have these one-liners, that they, and there's a lot of Americans that do actually believe that, Black Americans and white Americans. So that's the thing, like it's a tough narrative to actually, on one side, people will say black people are so oppressed and this and that, and it's more of a pity, like you get that on the left, and then there's the extreme bootstraps on the right, where it's like, well, we have all these athletes, we have all these black people are, what about Obama? And I think those arguments are unfortunately very there. But you bring up that interesting point on your show that like part of white privilege is being able to curate the black people around you. Like you could watch like Van Jones your whole life or whatever, and you don't even know what's going on in like a poor black community. And that's really interesting. So how would you recommend, like, because maybe getting to the end, like if there's people listening to this podcast that like might not know American culture, like an American that might want to know more about like what real people are thinking, like, or what, or they want to watch a good, podcast or political speaker that, might have more of his finger on the pulse. Do you have any recommendations or stuff like that?
Ooh, well, definitely come and check out our podcast over at Reset
I had to throw you there.
Yeah, yep, yeah, definitely come check us out over on Reset Race because we're a hot mess, and I feel like we're doing good work. I'm still trying to find more podcasts. I'm seeing a lot more like black people coming out and doing stuff, but I still see them towing that liberal line. Like,
yeah, there's not a lot.
And I'm suspicious of them. Like, I don't trust anybody until we get closer to the midterms, because these same people you see doing a little bit of trash talking, I have a feeling come the midterms, they're going to be back on that vote blue no matter who. So, but what I really tell people is if you really want to get to know black people, like, go make a poor black friend. Sorry, but it's actually that simple. Like, where we are. In every town where we're segregated in some little community, where you can go find a black person, just strike up a conversation. We're really friendly. Like, and we're going to be intrigued by the fact that you want to come and have a conversation with us.
It's funny, but it's true, isn't it? Like, yeah.
It is. Or, if you're, if you're not comfortable
country.
just walking up to random strangers, for those of you on social media, like, reach out to a random black person on social media that you find interesting, that seems like they're actually having real conversations, and start up a dialogue. I told you guys at the beginning of this, like, I made my new friend Edie. We met online in November. We were having a reparations conversation and we were going back and forth, and it's finally like, well, how about we just have a phone call? She's like my new best friend.
Boom. I love it.
So it happens.
It was nice to meet you. I'm glad you replied to my DM. Yeah, and if House of DELVENTO is here to we have our own Freedmen's Bureau now, so we're gonna cover reparations, and we'd love to get more, get all people watching, but specifically, folks, if you look like me, if you're white, if you're a male, I would love you to listen in. If you're white especially, I would love you to listen in and just hear some of these arguments a little more, because I think black people know a lot what's going on. A lot of the content is out there for your community, but I think it'd be nice to have, I don't like the term ally. I don't really like any of that stuff, but I'm going to say we are committed here, and we'd love to have more white people, more brown, more yellow, more red, more black, more of all color, but specifically the community in this country. You know who you are. That's got the money, that's got the power, that's got the politicians, that's got the phone calls, that knows what to do. Let's get together and really talk about reparations. But all are welcome. But I think it is time for the white flight to fly back over to the reparations land a little bit. So House of DELVENTO is here to do it. What's his name? He just passed away. Michael Brooks used to talk about it, but he's gone. Like, he's a white guy. He used to talk about reparations. And there's also, you're into some of the other speakers, like Italians, ironically. You're into Robin DiAngelo.
Yep, and Jacqueline Badalora. Mm-hmm.
Jacqueline Badalora. So they reach out to the white community. Are there any other specific people that try to reach out to, like, the white community, like specific reparations? Because I feel like it's an interesting niche, like specific arguments for, that. I don't know if it's coming out the right way. You know what I'm saying? Like specific.
I feel like it's
speakers.
still kind of new, right?
It is, yeah.
Like, I've been doing this reparations fight for like 2 years already, but people have just starting to pick it up now.
Yeah,
they
are.
Now that the election's over, but we were beating this drum before the election. That's why we're so sharp on the arguments. So
was it mostly inside the black community though, or did you have a lot of multi-discipline, multicultural?
We were in the Twitter sphere. So it was a lot of like Bernie people. Like, let me tell you, when you talk about racism on the left, I got called the N-word and told to go back to Africa so many times by lefties. That's why I'm like, yeah, y'all racist too. I don't care.
They don't like to talk about that.
They get mad at me. I don't care. And my favorite thing is I'll go home after you do, because most likely my family's been here longer.
Yeah.
So we can do that. But you go home first. Yeah, no, it's crazy. And a lot of people like, you can get reparations when you go back to Africa. I'm not from Africa. I'm from here. My family has been here for generations.
They think there's going to be some
many generations.
Proletarian revolution or something that like a bunch of podcasters and college kids are going to lead the charge with hammers and sickles and become a socialist country. And I'm like, no, it's not. Let's just get the reparations done. You're not going to lead a revolution. What are you like? I love their passion, but like they seem so lost now. Like Biden is not a liberal. Like he's like, where does the left even stand right now? What are they even doing? They're just tweeting.
That's it. And I had to get off Twitter. I needed a break. So yeah, no, that's it. That's all I see. Like I still like will creep over and like watch Jimmy Dore, and I see him dragging AOC and the other parts of the squad. But I knew they were frauds from the gate. Like I knew about AOC from the gate. From the moment "What is black? Who is black?" came out of her mouth when she was talking about reparations, I was done with her. I knew she was a snake in the grass.
Oh, did she make a comment on reparations? What did she say?
God.
I didn't know this one.
I'll send you the timestamp of that video too. Because no, there was 2 videos. So they were talking to her. It was Bree, who I hate, Brianna Joy Gray. So she was talking to her, and Brianna Joy Gray was talking about reparations, and she started off by saying, "Well, we gotta start off by saying, well, what is black? Who is black? Like with all of the multiculturalism happening these days, you know who black is. You know who the people who you beat were. You know who the people who you turned the hoses and the dogs on were. You know who the people who you segregated were. Don't play me like that, lady." Like that one. And then Ta-Nehisi Coates asked her about reparations, and she said that we shouldn't start reparations at slavery. We should start it at the New Deal, because that's when her people creeped on over on this side, on state side. Yeah. And I was like, yeah, you tricky. So that's her way of trying to pigeonhole Latinos into reparations. But the gag is Latinos were white up until a certain point in period. So if you go back and you start pulling these birth certificates and y'all are white people, like, what are you asking for? It's a lot. Yeah, so I knew I didn't like AOC from the gate. Like I knew from early on that she was going to be a problem. I'm just glad that she's a problem elsewhere, so I don't have to worry about her being the first Latina president.
She's going to be though.
No, she's not.
You don't think so? You don't think so?
Nope.
Latina
we killed
superstar?
Kamala. We killed Kamala's presidency. She got to be vice president, but we killed her. She came out the gate, and we sandbagged her from the gate. The internet went into her. They called us Russian bots. We came for Kamala so bad when she announced at Howard University.
She was calling out Biden too. I mean, people forget Biden's segregationist.
He's a whole racist. He said
he's old.
He didn't want his children growing up in a racial jungle, and I was like, I see why. Because Hunter Biden liked the dark meat. We saw it in pictures. That's why you knew your son was gonna be like his daddy.
All right, Sam, help me out with this. All right, we're gonna get real now. So here's the thing. Help me out with this, okay? Because this is a problem for me now in this new world. I feel like I'm wrong for liking dark women. Am I wrong now for liking dark women? I've liked dark women my whole life. This is the weird thing. Am I wrong now for like...
Why are you wrong?
Well, no, because I feel like there's this vibe now. This fucking clubhouse rooms, like you see they come after Bill Burr now? Like if Bill Burr says, oh, he's fetishizing black women. Like, so I don't date white. This is one of the things I almost married a Pakistani, whatever. But it's like, I feel like now people are going to say, oh, you're fetishizing people, you're white privilege. I'm like, this is a new argument now. I don't like.
Oh my goodness. Just enjoy. You're as bad as my friend. My other friend was like, I feel bad because I was never attracted to a black man. I was like, will you just enjoy what you like? Like,
see, this is what has happened. We're all walking on eggshells, but that's a good thing, I guess, right?
No, enjoy what you like. If you like black women, be with black women.
They say that about Bill. They said about Bill Maher too. Is like, oh, he just wants to.
Bill Maher likes like trashy black women.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they're a little rough looking.
I don't know.
I'm looking, but I don't like Bill. I don't like Bill Maher, anyways. I feel like he's paternalistic. But no, you just like what you like.
Well, that is the typical. That's the great way to put it. That is the typical Democrat that I think we've all grown up with. Is the paternalistic towards the black caucus. Is like, we're going to take care of you, which is the stereotype.
That's what they do.
But it's funny because Obama didn't do that. He told black people to put away the KFC. And Bill Clinton
pull up our pants, and he told Pookie to go out and vote. And if Obama was a full white man, there would have been so many written pieces about how we had a racist president and everything else. Like just put white skin on him and imagine some of the things. He literally went to Howard University. Was it Howard? No, it was Morehouse. It was Morehouse University. Black men, a ceremony. They're graduating from college, and he's telling them nobody's going to care about what you went through. No, you just have to get out here and work hard. This is at a black graduate. Could you imagine him saying this to a bunch of white women at like one of those white women colleges? Talking about nobody's going to care about what you've been through.
They're going to be having anxiety within 30
that's
seconds.
That's not the graduation speech. Like, give that speech like at the beginning of the semester. Like,
I remember several of those moments with Obama, and a lot of white people would we didn't want to say, it was just kind of, it's hard for me to say anything. Like, it's obviously just in this environment, we want to respect the first black president. But I remember many of those moments just sitting and being like, because before that, when Bill Cosby did it, I remembered the reaction. So I had I had a reaction in my head, like I'm obviously not black, so I don't, but I remember, when Bill Cosby said this, they did it. So I remember watching Obama saying some of this stuff, and they would kind of, so I'm like, it's really kind of interesting how this is.
That's why Jesse Jackson said what he said about Obama talking down to black people, but everybody dismissed it because they thought Jesse was being a hater. But he was letting us know early on that Obama was a problem.
Been talking down to black people on this faith-based.
But Obama hoodwinked us. He fooled us. He came out here and put on his African American face. Yep, he put on his black American face and pretended like he was a descendant of chattel slaves. So we thought he had our back. And then he pulled around and pulled out that king and started talking down to us. Like,
the only reason I'm mentioning him is because you brought up Ta-Nehisi Coates, and he wrote about reparations, and he also wrote a very beautiful piece at the end of the Obama years, and it's he's just such a great writer. He was just writing about like his hopes and dreams, and how at the end it was just he's never felt so hopeless in his life. Like, and he wrote the whole trajectory of it, and it was very
That's why
touching.
he wrotes fiction now. I'm like, that's why he writes fiction now.
Yeah, he just disappeared. Remember?
Yeah,
he just disappeared.
He's writing like the new Black Panther. He wrote like The Water Dancer, which is a fictional novel. But you know what the funny thing is? I had a lot of really negative things to say about Ta-Nehisi Coates running away. But after my past 18 months, I get it. I 100% get it. He was like, fuck this.
He checked out, I think, right?
If you read MLK's Where Do We Go From Here, there's a lot of hopelessness in that book. Like, you can feel it. Like, you can just feel like he's tired. He's tired of dealing with black people. He's tired of dealing with the white moderates. Like, he's just going and going, and he's just wanting people to come with him, and we're not there. And he even says in that book, like, he never wanted the movement to be a national movement. He wanted it to be a bunch of local movements pushing for things to happen in their own communities. And I think that's the problem now. I think we as a country, we're always so focused on doing these big national pushes and these big national movements, but we really need to start organizing our neighborhoods. Like, can you organize your 5 or 6 blocks around you so if some shit goes down, you guys can, take care of each other? Because it might come to that point.
Yeah, it's getting there. Can I ask one last question, though? You've been
so generous.
One last question. All right. What do you have to say about Italian Americans? Let's hear it. Let me hear it.
I don't know.
Let me hear what you have to say.
See, I don't know any. No, I don't know any. I'm from LA. Like,
wait a second. I thought we had a little DM where you said you were going to come out with a video about Italians. I think, right?
That's not Italian. It's the Irish.
Oh, it's the Irish? Oh, okay. We
it's
can
the
bash the Irish. Oh,
Yeah,
we can
not
bash.
the Italians. The Irish. The Italians. I don't have a lot of stories about the Italians. The Irish. The Irish were good.
They became
for putting
cops. Yeah.
They were good for putting their boots on the blacks' necks, and not only that, they went from being like indentured. They went from being like servants
Slaves,
to coming over. Like slave servants over there to coming over here to becoming slave masters. Like, what kind of shit is it in a person? But I still got to read this book called Pedagogy of the Oppressed, because they keep telling me there's a book. It talks about how, like, as an oppressed person, if you're not careful, you can become the oppressor. And I guess that's what happened with the Irish, because they were oppressed over here, then over there, and then they came over here and literally started oppressing black people. And there's literally literature written where they're like talking about like how they should side with the blacks. Like you see some Irish people be like, no, we should side with the blacks. What's going on to them isn't right because of what happened in our country. Then you got the other side's like, fuck that, fuck them. We're going to go be white. Like, let's get this money. So.
Damn. Okay. So it's the Irish. All right, we're all right.
Yeah, it's not the Italians. It's the Irish. You were telling me I have an Italian fetish because
I'm sorry. Well, no,
I was got a whole new book out I got to read because
I was thinking you have an Italian fetish. Well,
yeah.
there it is a weird history, because like my grandpa used to tell us stories how like the old Italians were like. I don't like that argument like Italians used to be black because they weren't, but like they were like a brown immigrant group, so they were in a little different group. But then through the white supremacy system, they worked their way up. Like after World War II, like I said, kill a few Nazis, you come back, here's your house. It's like it's that thing. It's like that stuff that the black community was not able to get. We had this Freedmen's Bureau that set up a lot of good stuff, and then. White people bombed it all. So it's like, it's interesting. But the Italians were able to mobilize up. The Irish were able to mobilize up. The Germans, the Jews, the Latin American, now the Indians, the Pakistanis. So it's like I keep saying, it should be a no-brainer. Like the reparations, like, you might follow it casually, like I said, or you might be for or against. But after you do some reading, after you watch some of Sam's shows, maybe after you watch a few of our podcasts, I want people to come out thinking it's a no-brainer. So we'll see what happens. Folks, this was a great conversation. Hopefully I can get a couple guests on. I try to get in touch with Darity. If you know him, I'd love to get in touch with him and get him on here. But I'd love to get some more people on here to keep this Freedmen's Bureau series going because I think it's really relevant. And it's a tough conversation, but it was really nice to speak with you, Sam, specifically. Oh, geez, I think I'm doing a heartfelt outro, and then the camera might have froze it, so I'll cut it out. But I'll just say thank you again for coming, and we'll see you next time. All right, I think I might have lost Sam there at the end of my little outro, but it was just a pleasure to speak with her and begin this conversation about reparations. I know it was more of a casual conversation. We just kind of went all over the place. It was great, nice long podcast, but we're going to keep synthesizing these arguments and synthesizing this content and keeping it going. Oh, all right.
Join us on Patreon at www.patreon.com/Reset Race Network.
Thank you again. We're for reparations here on House of DELVENTO, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.